Yesterday on Twitter, Matt Mooney officially announced that he will not be returning to USD for his senior season. He isn't sure where he'll be transferring to yet, but he did make it official that he will not be suiting up for the Coyotes. He explained how difficult of a decision it was and thanked the coaching staff, his teammates, and the fans for all of their support during his time in Vermilion. If you'd like to read the full post, you can find it on Mooney's Twitter, which is @Moonswag13. But until then, we have compiled some of the best Mooney moments that we had the privilege of witnessing while Matt was at USD. Take a look.
Shooting the ball. All 5 guys on the floor, great from the arc.
First attempt to the night for Mooney, knocks it down. The Coyote crowd gets something to cheer about.
Give South Dakota a chance here to get set and run a set play.
Going to create his own shot. 3 is good with 3 seconds remaining in the half.
Yeah, they're just falling way too much with the 3 right now.
Big one.
Well, I think I speak for everyone here at Midco Elsen in saying that we have had a blast covering Matt Mooney during his time at USD, and we wish him the best wherever his future takes him. But in the meantime, joining me now to talk about transfers around the Summit League and the impact that they can have is our expert panel, Jay Elsen and Tom Nieman here in Sioux Falls, and Brian Shawn joining us from our West Fargo studios. So first of all, we're going to start with Mooney. Actually, we're going to take a look at the transfer list, a few of the higher profile guys from the Summit League that are moving on to go elsewhere. So John Trey Harris of Oral Roberts, Jax Levitch from Fort Wayne, Mooney, of course, from South Dakota, and Javon White of Oral Roberts. So ORU has 2 of those on the list. The entire list of transfers from the Summit League is actually 16 names. That's including 2 from the University of North Dakota who will enter the league in this coming season. But let's talk about Matt Mooney. Jay, we'll start with you. He has a variety of options to go to, high majors included, and of course, you know, these are all Twitter speculations, people tweeting and everything. You have talked to him a little bit, but what are some of the big names that we could see him at next year?
Well, there's been a ton of them, and I think that's what's so surprising. It's not that there's interest in Matt Mooney. We all knew there would be, but it's the profile of the schools that are interested that I think has taken a lot of people back, including myself, which is, I mean, a lot of historic programs have at least made a call to him and tried to feel him out about where he's at right now. Among those, Texas Tech, Creighton, Oregon, Indiana, Arizona State, Northwestern, Michigan has been linked to him. Virginia has been linked to him in some reports. Now, will he visit all of them? No, and that's the next step in the process. Now that he's made it official, he's not going to come back to USD. He's got to figure out what official visits he's going to take, and he's in the process of doing that right now. I would expect that we'll know at least a little bit more on that end of it here coming up very soon.
And he's no stranger to this. Already, completed the Division I transfer process when he left Air Force and came to USD, except this time around he's a grad transfer, so unlike last time, he won't have to sit out a year. Well, next we'll go up to Brian Shawn in West Fargo, because one of the names that wasn't on that transfer list is John Konchar of Fort Wayne, obviously a standout in the Summit League for all of his years here, and he could grad transfer, but he's staying in Fort Wayne, Bichon.
Yeah, and I think that's huge when you look at what Fort Wayne lost with Bryce and Scott. They have a transfer sitting out who started all 32 games at Northern Arizona in 2015-16 in DeBerry, Marcus DeBerry, that sat out last year with transfer rules. So you take back Konchar, you have Harrell, now you add another transfer like DeBerry that can be an impact guy. Fort Wayne's sitting okay. All of a sudden you lose a guy like Konchar, your team looks so much more different than what it's looked like in the past. So, for Fort Wayne to hang on to Konchar, I think would have been as sought after, if not more sought after than Mooney had he decided to go, is pretty significant for John Kaufman.
Well, and talking about grad transfers that are leaving, Ronny Harrell is leaving Creighton and going to Denver. He's actually cousins with the Denver head coach Rodney Billups. Started 14 of 30 games as a junior at Creighton, 7 points a game, just over 6 rebounds. How big of a get is that for Denver?
Well, I think it's huge to get a guy that can play inside and rebound the basketball. When you lose a guy like Daniel Amigo, that's one area where I think Denver was maybe a little bit vulnerable going into next season, is inside, a guy that can control the paint a little bit. So you bring in a grad transfer like that, Billups obviously knows this young man very, very well. So to bring him in, he should assimilate right into what they're doing, and comes from a really good culture of basketball at Creighton, playing for Greg McDermott. So it works both ways. You can get these grad transfers that can be impact guys for a year, as we saw with Nick Fuller at USD, or you can lose a guy and it really impacts your team the other way. But that's life right now in mid-major basketball. So get used to it.
Well, we talk about Mooney, we talk about Konchar. A guy that's had just as much speculation, if not more than both of these people, Mike Daum at South Dakota State. But as of right now, Tom, he's staying. What do you know about his situation?
Well, as far as we know, as far as a grad transfer, it's a possibility. But the more urgent, I think, for South Dakota State fans is Mike's going to probably try the NBA. There is a deadline to make yourself eligible for the NBA draft, and that is coming up actually this Sunday. I get the feeling that Mike will test the waters for the NBA again this year, see where his stock might be going into next season, and if he does not hire an agent, which he has not yet to this point, he can still, there is another deadline coming up in June where you say, I'm going back to school, and we think that's where Mike's at right now. But the grad transfer route, I don't get the feeling from talking to Mike or from talking to people around him that that is going to be an option for him. The crazy thing is that there are hardly any rules right now for tampering as far as when you talk about Matt Mooney and some of these guys that are grad transfers, how they get contacted by these other schools. It can be a buddy, it can be a booster. It is so wide open that it is just crazy.
Former
right
AAU
now.
coaches, things like that. I mean, former junior college coaches for some of these guys, they've all taken those routes. So there's so many connections, not to mention coaching connections and things. So maybe Matt doesn't have a direct connection with a school, but he's got a connection with a coach who knows a coach who knows a coach. Or so, I mean, that's literally how this stuff goes right now. And you know, officially the schools couldn't contact him, of course, until he got his release. Once he got that and made that public, then we saw how quickly people called Matt Mooney. I mean, it was nuts. People coming to Vermillion within a couple of days of that announcement.
Oh my gosh, it's insane. But with transfers, it's becoming just a hotter and hotter topic in Division I basketball, especially at the mid-major level. And you know, there's speculation about the new transfer rule coming out where you wouldn't have to sit out a year. There's the grad transfer. There's all sorts of, I feel like, loopholes when it comes to waivers. But specifically with the mid-major, I know we've talked about this a little bit before on the show. How can the, ease of transferring really impact mid-majors, Jay?
Well, you know, obviously it hurts the mid-major school because then, you know, their top guys can all of a sudden get poached to go to bigger schools. And that's what the problem is. I mean, you're talking about not only are you losing Matt Mooney off of South Dakota, but you're losing him from the Summit League. And this is one of the highest profile guys in the conference without question. We talked about a couple of the others, of course, in John Konchar and Mike Daum. And there are more of them, but I mean, you're talking about one of the top three guys, certainly one of the contenders for Player of the Year the last couple of years, and Mike being another, and Konchar being another. I mean, anytime the league loses a guy like that, it hurts everybody, not just their particular school.
Mooney's kind of blown it up, though, this year. That has been the big deal. Because for the most part, in the Summit League, we've seen more impact of guys coming in, transferring in, whether it's a grad transfer or a lower level transfer. More of an impact coming into the league. But Mooney this year's kind of blown that up. There's been cases, Kai Cabellas of North Dakota State, Trayshawn Thurman in Omaha that left to go to Nevada and sat out a year. It's been less going out than it has coming in. But now that Mooney is making this big impact, this is going to get it all rolling again on what are we going to do about the mid-majors going forward. So it's going to be interesting. And you talk about the rule that they're thinking about where there'll be no penalty in football, possibly, or in basketball to transfer from a D1 to a D1 where you won't have to sit out. We're probably going to get to that. It's going to be crazy.
It would open a whole different kind of Pandora's box there. I mean, we'd see things go, I think, anyway, to a whole different level if that happens. And I honestly do think it's trending that direction. It's probably just a matter of time. And Brian, I don't know what you feel about it with what you've talked to the guys up in Fargo, but I mean, down here, you know, I mean, there's obviously a very high level of concern for that because then you just kind of water down these mid-major leagues, which are already struggling to get the street cred, quote unquote, with, like, say, the NCAA tournament.
But it could go both ways. But yeah, Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, you know, here's the thing. You talk to some coaches from around the country that I get a chance to know, and there are some coaches that are head coaches at this mid-major to low-major level that are almost treating it like, tell you what, come in, we're going to make you better and we'll help you move on. I mean, they're almost looking at these four-year universities now. We're used to bring a guy in as a freshman and keep him to a senior, almost treat him more like a junior college where, hey, come in, we're going to make you better and if we can help you move on. They almost market that openly at some low levels just to get the recruiting talent in, which is totally different from anything we ever saw, 5 years ago. That would have been totally off the rails. So it's hurting some programs more than others. But at the end of the day, coaches at this level are going to have to adjust or get left behind because any player that is going to make that kind of move, it's going to be tough to hang on to him if that transfer rule does change. That's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah, that's what that's like is it's like the one and dones going to the Kentuckys and the Dukes and things like that. This would be the mid-major version of that. It's exactly what Brian's talking about there, where coaches could convince guys come in, hey, we don't expect you to stay 4 years, but we can help you get to that Power 5 level so that you can get more exposure and go to the NBA or get a pro deal somewhere else.
Will you see it coming the other way though, like the kid that's going from Creighton to Denver?
Yeah, sure you can.
You'll see some of it coming around the other way. And the only way we're going to find out if it works is if we implement it, and I think they're going to somewhere in the next couple of years, and see how that flows.
And if it's a disaster, they can always go back, I guess. Yeah. But I mean, it's going to open a whole different can of worms if they get that far.
Trust the process, Joel Embiid.
It is it's very fluid right now, as one coach told me. If you're out recruiting, I mean, the only thing you have in your pocket is your relationship right now with the players, between the player and the school and the coaches. That's all there is holding a lot of these relationships together. So it's crazy.
That's stressful.
And if a coach leaves at the mid-major level, then I think it could create, even more opportunities for players just to completely vacate, a program, and that's what gets even scarier for some of these mid-major programs.
All right. Well, I'm sure we'll be touching on all of these things and just the latest news from the transfer situation in the Summit League in future shows. But thank you so much, guys. All right. Coming up after the break, we'll check in on Summit League softball and the challenges they continue to face with the weather. And also, Tom Nieman has a feature on the Jackrabbit softball team. Stay right here.